Hello, my name is Nancy, and at the age of 29, I am ambitiously pursuing my career goals. Currently, I live with my husband Benjamin. Recently, I've been thinking seriously about the possibility of starting a family. However, Benjamin feels that we should prioritize building and settling into a new home before we consider having children. Consequently, we are both working hard to save up for our future residence. Even though I would love to start our family sooner rather than later, Benjamin's firm stance on this matter becomes clear every time we discuss the possibility of children. He consistently emphasizes the importance of establishing our home first, which I find disheartening as it often feels like he dismisses my feelings. It seems I have no choice but to push myself even harder to contribute more to our savings. We have been married for a year, and I have begun to recognize a recurring theme in our relationship. Benjamin seldom takes my viewpoints into account, a habit that has continued from our dating days. While I once admired his decisiveness, I now realize that mutual respect for opinions is crucial in a marriage. I am increasingly concerned about the stability of our relationship, especially given the influence of his parents who live nearby. Benjamin often visits his parents under the pretext of saving money. However, I've noticed that he frequently spends time with his colleagues enjoying drinks and not factoring these outings into a strict budget. It baffles me how he holds me to rigorous saving standards while allowing himself certain liberties. His frugality even reaches into minor details, such as conserving hot water and turning off lights prematurely, rules that he seems to apply only to me. Our relationship feels increasingly lopsided. Although I am deeply frustrated, he seems to think it's reasonable to enforce his way of thinking on others. Whenever we visit his parents, tensions rise. It's been a year since you two got married. We'd love some good news soon, my in-laws often exclaim, eager to meet their grandchild. At these moments, I catch Benjamin giving a disapproving look, silently signaling them to avoid unnecessary comments. As these pressures mount, I find myself at a crossroads, questioning how we can find a balance that respects both our dreams and the practical aspects of our lives together. While Benjamin and I both yearn for a child, he insists that we should build our own home before expanding our family. It's quite unfair how my in-laws pressure me about having a baby rather than speaking to Benjamin, who seems indifferent to my feelings about the timing, I think to myself. Despite my urge to speak out, I often find myself muted by their relentless expectations for a grandchild. After dinner, Benjamin walks out for a smoke and remarks, "Nancy, you're working hard, but if you really want to be a housewife, you should consider quitting your job and focusing on home life. Maybe that's why you're not getting the attention you need from Benjamin." It's as if he's implying that my career is the reason we can't start a family, which is unfair and untrue. Benjamin himself isn't ready to have children anytime soon. Frustrated, I respond sharply to my in-law. Benjamin was the one who encouraged me to keep working. Why don't you talk to him before you lecture me again? My patience wears thin as I continue. I want children too, but Benjamin is the one who's not ready. Please direct your concerns to him instead of constantly criticizing me. My words seem to shock my in-laws. I excuse myself from the table and head towards the door, my frustration boiling. Benjamin, casually smoking by the entrance, doesn't say a word. As I get into the car, a friend who had joined us for dinner follows and casually remarks, "Are you leaving already?" She's unaware of the tension. Exhausted by the recurring pressures from my in-laws and Benjamin's indifference, I finally declare that I won't be visiting the in-laws' home anymore. Benjamin looks at me surprised and argues, "Why not? We can save on food costs, right? Besides, you want a home and kids soon, don't you?" Fed up, I snapped. "If it's really about saving, then maybe you should cut back on your drinking and smoking rather than driving to your parents just to save the cost of a meal. Why can't you make savings in those ways too?" Everyone needs a break. I voiced my frustration. Benjamin had always imposed restrictions on me, like avoiding the use of hot water and mandating lights off by 9 p.m. Under the guise of saving money, he seemed to think that making these changes wouldn't require any real sacrifices. If I'm the only one making these adjustments, then I don't even want this house. I'm so tired of it. You never give up anything yourself, but you're perfectly fine demanding sacrifices from others, I protested. Benjamin tried to brush off my concerns, suggesting they weren't significant, but I firmly countered, no, it is a big deal. Do you realize how much patience I've had to muster all this time? His ongoing pretense in front of his parents, acting as though I was the reason we couldn't have grandchildren, infuriated me further. I'm tired of being pressured about grandchildren. It's not me who's hesitant about having children, it's Benjamin. I've been clear about wanting them soon, so please stop this constant pressure, I continued, my voice steeped in exasperation. Seeing Benjamin struggle to respond to my uncharacteristic outburst brought a bitter sense of satisfaction, but it didn't solve our underlying issues. Feeling uncertain about what to do next, I just stared out of the car window, ignoring Benjamin. A turning point came a month later when a relative of mine, my father's brother, passed away. He left behind several pieces of land and a luxurious mansion and lived a lavish lifestyle. Benjamin's eyes widened when he learned of my uncle's impressive estate. I didn't realize you had such a remarkable relative, he commented. A few days after hearing about my inheritance, I decided to discuss the inheritance details with a lawyer in our apartment, knowing the matter was exclusively mine and seeing Benjamin's discomfort with the idea of inheritance. I politely asked him to step out of the room to avoid any potential complications his presence might cause. After about 5 hours of detailed explanation from the lawyer, I thanked him and saw him out. Surprisingly, when I turned around, Benjamin was not in the apartment. Assuming he had stepped out to give us privacy, I began preparing dinner, unaware of the changes that lay ahead. 4 months later, Benjamin would come to me with an unexpected confession. Benjamin's unexpected invitation for a drive filled me with a mix of excitement and curiosity. As we drove into a residential area, my curiosity turned to confusion when we stopped in front of a house unfamiliar to me. Benjamin pressed the intercom, and to my surprise, my in-laws stepped out, not from their usual home, but from this new one. My father-in-law beamed, exclaiming, "You finally made it. So, when are you and Nancy moving in?" "We're thinking of moving in by the end of this month." His next words were less welcoming. He accused me of being a selfish daughter-in-law and of shifting the responsibility of having children onto Benjamin. I shot Benjamin a disapproving look, bewildered as to why he would bring me here when I had made it clear that I didn't want to visit my in-laws anymore, seeking clarity. I asked Benjamin for an explanation. He responded almost too calmly, "Don't be so upset. If we live together, it can help mend the relationship between you and my mom. Besides, this will be our new home from now on, so you should be more cooperative about the children's issues." His revelation stunned me. I had expressly stated I didn't want to live with them, yet here he was announcing plans that were already set in motion without my agreement. The house, as Benjamin explained, was a 2-family residence. My plan was always for us to eventually live with my parents, so what's the problem with living in a 2-family house now? He asked, as if the arrangement should have been obvious. As I mulled over the situation, the implications of living in such a house became clear, especially in light of our finances. Constructing such a grand house seemed beyond our means, and I couldn't understand how Benjamin managed it. My dad and I chipped in the money, so our savings are empty. But that's fine, right? Benjamin said nonchalantly, revealing a complete disregard for our mutual financial planning. He then added, "I heard your uncle's inheritance was about $720,000, so if you use that money to repay us for the cost of this 2-family house, it should all work out, huh?" His assumption that my inheritance would simply be used to cover these expenses without my consent left me astounded. The audacity of his plan, assuming I would finance these arrangements unilaterally, was not only presumptive but deeply unsettling. Frustrated with the entire ordeal, Benjamin delved into his bag and pulled out a pre-filled divorce form with his name already scribbled on it. "Your money is our money. If you don't like living together, let's just get a divorce," he declared confidently, handing me the form. Resolutely, I replied, "Fine. If those are the only options, then divorce is the better choice for me." I slipped the divorce form into my bag, turned my back on him and my stunned in-laws, and walked away without heeding their reactions. As I walked out, I mentioned offhandedly, "By the way, I renounced my uncle's inheritance." Benjamin stood frozen, his face etched with confusion. Without waiting for any response, I caught a bus and returned to our apartment. Once home, I filled in my name on the divorce form that already bore Benjamin's, finalized it, and promptly submitted the divorce papers. Then I went to a home improvement store, bought several cardboard boxes, and started preparing for my move. Recognizing I couldn't manage the move alone, I hired a moving company. Luckily, it was a slow season for moves, allowing for a quick relocation. As I packed, I heard Benjamin arrive at the door. I had the chain lock on and called out, "Sorry I had the chain on. I'm not sure what you might do in your current state of anger. Besides, I need to finish packing. Could you stay at your parents' house for a few days?" Defiantly, Benjamin said, "I won't accept a divorce." His statement surprised me. I reminded him, "But you handed me the divorce form, didn't you? If you sign the divorce papers, that means you agree to the divorce." He looked puzzled and frustrated, quickly changing the subject. "Why would you give up on a $720,000 inheritance? Normally you'd inherit it," he questioned, clearly having caught bits of information about the inheritance, but misunderstanding the situation. It seemed he had overheard some details about the $720,000 inheritance and in a rush had gone to my in-laws. They in turn impulsively bought the two-family house without considering the full implications. I clarified, "The inheritance discussion was mine to handle, and renouncing it was my decision made to avoid exactly these kinds of entanglements and presumptions. Given the complexity of my uncle's estate, renouncing the inheritance seemed the wisest choice. Though he had $720,000, the costs associated with his assets were enormous. His mansion required demolition, the land demanded significant upkeep, and he had accrued substantial debts. Despite having 2 sons, 2 daughters, a wife, and grandchildren, all had chosen to renounce their claims, leaving the inheritance to me." When I explained this to Benjamin, he was incredulous. "No way. So you're saying that even with $720,000, there wouldn't have been much left? That sounds like fraud," he exclaimed. I clarified that after a thorough discussion with the lawyer, it became clear that the inheritance was more of a burden than a boon. Unfortunately, someone had eavesdropped on part of this conversation and misunderstood the full context. My explanation left Benjamin speechless, and it seemed he finally realized his mistake. However, I firmly told him, "It's too late now. You betrayed my trust. We've already filed for divorce, and you and I are no longer a couple." "Why are you now hinting that you don't want the divorce?" I asked. "If you truly didn't want to separate, you should have followed me immediately when I returned." I reminded him of the consequences of his and his father's decisions, particularly their investment in the two-family house, without considering all the facts. I pointed out that his mother's opinion on the divorce didn't alter the reality of our situation. Her lack of experience with financial matters might have prevented her from understanding the true value of money. With a heavy sigh, I realized that entertaining complaints about his parents was no longer my concern. If we were still married, perhaps I might have listened and discussed these issues, but under the current circumstances, it was no longer appropriate for me to engage in such conversations. However, I reminded him, "You haven't submitted the divorce papers yet, have you?" He pleaded desperately, "If you do it now, we can still be a couple. Please, let's live together in that two-family house." But I had already submitted the divorce papers, so there was no turning back. "It's pointless now," I replied firmly. His face fell, a picture of bewilderment and loss, as he stood at the apartment door. While I believed he had brought this situation upon himself, I couldn't let him linger outside indefinitely. After briefly considering sending him away, I realized I had no time to waste and continued my preparations for moving. Eventually he left, and I proceeded with my plans. I notified my workplace about the divorce, given that my boss had acted as our mediator. Feeling a need to explain the situation, I also shared the news with my coworkers during lunch break. These were the same people who had celebrated with us at our wedding. Unexpectedly, Benjamin burst into my department while I was discussing this with my colleagues, exclaiming, "It's absurd that you're talking about the divorce. I wish you hadn't mentioned it." He then proceeded to explain to everyone that he had assumed I had inherited a significant estate, which led to his impulsive suggestion of buying the two-family house. Faced with the choice between divorce and living together, I chose divorce. As a result, Benjamin found himself increasingly ostracized at work, even as my colleagues extended their sympathy towards me. The situation at his job grew so uncomfortable that he eventually resigned. During this turbulent time, a male colleague approached me. He confessed, "I've actually liked you for a long time. I hope to build a home where we can communicate as a couple and work things out together." This unexpected confession offered a glimpse of a potentially different and more understanding partnership in the future.